Yeah.
Preferences.
And while that's getting transitioned over, I think the key thing is, for years, we've been making reductions. Some of this maybe 7 or so years ago was a bigger time when we made some key reductions. And then we had the hiatus during COVID where we had inflated fund balances. And now we're back to the reality of where we started in 2018 before COVID funds came in and kind of ballooned out districts to kick that can down the road. And so what we're seeing here is this cumulative effect. And we have been keeping it away from the classrooms as much as we possibly can. We're not sure how much longer we can do that because the surrounding supports are now at their bare minimum, and so things are starting to get challenging as we find ways to reduce the budget. Tammy will walk through kind of what we've identified to date. And again, as we consider the budget reduction process, I had mentioned at the start, again, tonight we're not coming to you all for, directional support. Just really trying to get a good common level setting of where we're at financially and some of the tough decisions before us and what we're identifying of areas to consider. If we go into February for the study session, one of the things that we have to keep in mind is that that's about 2 weeks later than what we've typically identified as when we would like to roll out our staffing allocations to schools. We're fairly close, but if there's some things that between now and then you all are saying, yeah, we'd like to see more of this or less of this, there could be some secondary impact to our staffing, and so we'll have to hold on our staffing, which is usually around mid-February, for about a 2-week lag. It's not the end of the world, because we used to be a little over a month lag in the past. But we've gotten used to pretty quickly being competitive in the staffing market. When other districts are posting positions, we might be now 2 weeks behind them. And when we're vying for a competition of folks, dwindling folks going into education, your first round draft picks go pretty quickly. So that's something that we'll have to balance. And if there are certain things that we can continue to move forward with, we certainly would make that request. Otherwise, I think we'll have to adjust kind of our timeline too on staffing based upon being able to be thoughtful in the recommendations that we move forward with. So with that, I'll turn it to you, Tam.
Thank you, Dr. Thomas. Because we have some new board members, I'm going to do a little bit of refresher. So I apologize if you've seen this before, but just wanted to make sure we're all on the same page as we look at revenue. So in our revenue sources, we have non-categorical revenue, which is our flexible spending dollars. And you've seen many of these because it's part of our levy certification when we talk in December. So some of these you've already seen, but a lot of these are formula-based, based on enrollment numbers. So I've kind of given on here, I'm not going to go through every one of them, but these are the non-categorical that we can spend however we need to spend. And I've referred to the statute that gives us that authority. So you can see all of these are flexible. And then we have categorical, which are restricted. Again, some of these you've seen on the levy certification, and others of these are formula-based. All of these are, I think the board has seen, in the last budget cycle, there's a spreadsheet that I've given the board that has our revenue projections, and it lists, I have 2 sections on it. There's the levy or the state aid portions, and I show you what the formula is, what the enrollment number is, and then calculate it out to show you what that state aid entitlement is. And then the bottom section has the levy, which I do the same thing. So these will be the same categories that you'll see on that general cost revenue sheet that I give you when we get further into the budget. And these are the categories. They're very restricted. We have to spend them on these particular items. If we don't, many of them have to be put into a designated reserve in our fund balance if you don't spend them all. Again, I'm not going to go through all of these, but you can see there's career tech ed, achievement integration, our literacy incentive, student support revenue. All of those we have to spend the exact way that it's stated in statute. This is just kind of get us grounded, what our enrollment looks like. Again, you've seen these numbers. These numbers have all the different grade levels for the next few years forecasted out. So when we look at that, because many of these are formula based, we look at the allocations that we currently did this current year in 24-25. We had of our total revenue, 104 million went to schools, 18 million to departments, so that was 123 million. Our revenue projection was 122 million. This board authorized use of fund balance of $957,000. That's this current year. If we look at, and this is the report that I was referring to that I give you to show you all the state aid categories and the revenue projection. So our basic formula aid is going up to 7,465 per pupil unit. You can do the math, and it's going to be about 70 million. All of these are formula based. So our total state aid that we're projecting for revenue is 96.7 million. If we look at the levy, which we've already approved this in December, so we know our levy is going to be 17.8 million. Again, in these categories, you've seen them when we talked about the levy. So our state aid projections 97 million. The levy projection about 18 million. And then we have other fundings categories that include investment earnings, our federal grants, donations, third-party billing. We're estimating that to be about 5.7 million. So our projection for our revenue for 25-26 is 120 million for 103,000. So given that, we have to build to get the expenditure projections. So when we do that, we have to make some assumptions. And I've listed the assumptions that we're making, that we're going to use the basic gen ed formula allowance that's approved, whatever it's going to be in the legislature. If they change it this year, we'll adjust our projections, but right now they've got it set at $7,465. Our salary increases will be based on negotiated collective bargaining agreements. We have to pay what we agreed to in those bargaining agreements. I'm assuming that the weather patterns will be similar. So when we look at utilities and some of that facilities planning, the way that we typically will build a budget is we look at, for instance, the utilities budget. We'll take a 5-year actual, average it out for the 5 years. If we know that the utility company has given us, for instance, this past year, they said we're increasing the rates 8%. So the budget would be 5-year average plus 8%. That's what we're going to build in for utilities. Again, that's assuming that we're going to have similar weather patterns. If we have 3 feet of snow in February, I shouldn't say that out loud, but then that may create a different planning. Student support, I'm assuming it's going to be consistent with the previous years. Again, we're looking at a 5-year history. We have to assume that those categorical funding will be used for the required purposes. The revenue that we get for 25-26 will be spent for the students who are in school in 25-26. Any legislative changes, we'll have to follow those as required. And then contracts and supplies, we're increasing those by a reasonable amount, assuming some CPI index. And the enrollment rate close to projected. If any of those assumptions don't hold, then our budget will not be what the original budget looked like. And then let me just say that the contracts and supplies, so for instance, our transportation contract, they are also on the hook for ESST and unemployment and family medical leave. They, for a contractor, the way that they pay for that is to charge their vendor or their suppliers. So we are going to be seeing that cost increase, not the transportation company. I mean, they're going to have to pay it. We're going to see the increase in our contract. And that's the same for any contract that we have for services that are going to involve people. So we just have to take that into consideration as we're looking at some of these contracts and supplies. Again, I know inflation may just really skyrocket. If that does, we'll have to reevaluate what we're assuming for supplies. But again, we have to build a budget, so these are going to be our assumptions that we're going to use as we build that budget. You've seen the 5-year projection. I've given you a copy of the 5-year forecast. It's last year, the year before, when we presented this 5-year projection, the trajectory hasn't changed. And this is a projection if nothing changes. So if we continue to do things the way that we have every year for our expenditures, we're going to have to be making reductions every year. The revenues, again, I'm assuming a flat enrollment. If we all of a sudden gain many more kids, this is a different projection. But right now, I don't see that happening. The county has said that we're flat on birth rates. There's a whole bunch of other factors to look at. I'm assuming flat enrollment. And if that's the case, then we'll be reducing our expenditure budget for the next at least 5 years. If we look at the district service center staff, I think this question has come up several times. I've got on here what each of the departments, the positions that each department has in their budget. You can see not all of these are administrative positions, but there are many that support buildings. So for instance, the TOSA, the curriculum TOSAs are usually out in the buildings. So while their workplace is assigned here, they're not necessarily here all the time. They're out supporting buildings. And you also need to keep in mind that many of these positions are funded with categorical funding. So we pulled out, on the right, you can see that of these staff that are assigned to the district service center, 64% of them are paid out of the general fund. The rest of them are paid out of categorical funding, and some of them are in Fund 2 and Fund 4, which aren't even part of our general fund. So we just need to kind of keep that in mind as we're looking at how we pay our staff, because we do have to spend our categorical funding in the way that it was intended to.
A quick question, Tammy. So is this 7.1 million and change part of the whole 120? This is part of the total budget that is all rolled in?
Correct.
This is okay.
Yep.
There's no different funding that's being.
No, when we say general fund, it includes all of it, other than Fund 2 and
The general fund is.
just Fund 1, so it's excluding child nutrition and community ed, but everything else will be part of the general, general fund definition.
So I have a question about, I'm just going to pick special ed because it's right at the bottom. So you mentioned the categorical funding for this. Is it categorical to the point where you have to have these positions, or would these positions potentially, you could take that money and hire more paras? I'm just for.
Yeah, you can have whatever staff.
It's categorical within that category, but not
Within
specific
special
to this. Okay, thank you.
Can I ask 2 quick questions on the financial projection?
Mm-hmm.
If you go back a slide, so there was just 2 kind of outliers that stuck out to me. So the local sources of property taxes for 25-26 decreased from 2 million. I noticed that was like a long-term facility maintenance thing on this page. What is that for? Why are we projecting that's decreasing in 25-26 in the top row? It's just
For
an outlier
property
from,
taxes or the long-term?
yeah, so from this year's budget to 25-26, it decreases 2 million before it kind of goes back up. And then I was looking at it, like, I think it might tie to this long-term facilities maintenance that suddenly goes down to 500K next year. What is
Yep,
that?
so we had been overspending our long-term facilities maintenance every year, which by statute you're allowed to do. You can because with the long-term facilities maintenance, you have to submit a 10-year plan to the state. And they allow you to kind of borrow against the future years if you have a project that you need to do that year. And we had a few things that the repair of the pools, there was a leak in the dive well. So we had to kind of take future money that we had planned and spend it, but you have to make up for that. So we ended up having less long-term facilities maintenance because we'd already borrowed in the future.
So like when we did the parking lots last year and we had to close everything down, we did a whole bunch of other projects that were scheduled for other years because we had already shut down the schools.
And you take it out of future
Right.
projects.
Yep.
And then the second one was the instructional support services. I saw that is going up like 500K or like a 5% increase next year.
So instructional support services will be all those support staff that are essentially at the schools.
Right.
You're going to have salary increases. We've added some support staff at the buildings. So
And we also have highly tenured, so that,
So that's 5% year over year seems high to me, but.
includes health and benefits.
correct.
Yes.
Yep, it's salary plus benefits. And then any contracts that we have.
And remember, people that have been here longer, the tenured and we're very top heavy.
Yeah.
They actually take an increasing percentage.
They're just, it was a higher percentage than the other employees, so it was just an outlier, I was curious.
Yeah, we can certainly break that down further. I think it's actually in our budget document. I think we break it down. So given all of that, these are our recommendations for reductions. The first section, this was already discussed at the December board meeting and we got a thumbs up. So those we've already kind of put in motion. The rest of them are, it's 2 pages, so it's this and this. So that's the conversation that we're hoping to have in the remainder of tonight.
Just one quick question, Tammy, before we dive in. Your projections are assuming flat enrollment. I see declining enrollment as we move forward. Can you help me understand your projection based on?
So far, we have a slight decline in the enrollment, and I built in what that decline is in our enrollment in the projection, in the 5-year forecast. This year, we actually got more kids than what we thought we were gonna have, and we're hoping that happens. I did ask our enrollment folks today what our kindergarten looked like, and we're slightly below what our kindergarten looked like at the same time last year. And again, we still have a few months to try to improve that. And we did meet with all of our elementary principals last Friday, and they are working on, they all got a list of the students in their area and would be assigned to their building, and they are trying to make contact with some of those families.
But
So-
your numbers, your projections do correlate this slight decline year over year. Okay.
Yep.
I'd like to get some clarification. I went back and watched our meeting in December, and because there's been several things that have elevated to our level regarding registration. And my understanding from watching that board meeting again is that we as a board gave directive to go ahead and start the enrollment process. And then once the enrollment process kind of shook out, then we would come back and revisit this to see how many FTE reductions needed to be made or whatever, versus maybe I'm hearing this wrong, where you said that's already baked in and we're done and we cannot touch that, the 2.3
No, I
million. So
said this is kind of, the ship has sailed, that we got thumbs up to go ahead and move forward with those, that first 3.
and that's what I'm saying. I'm hearing, when I went back and watched the meeting again, I just watched it today, it was very clear that, and please chime in, half of you guys were
Yeah.
here, that we were going to open up registration, and that's what the thumbs up was. And then once registration, we came through registration.
If I remember, I was almost in reverse. We needed, they needed to know what the cut so they could do registration.
We had to adjust the registration manuals, and we needed to know what we would put and adjust the elective schedule at the secondary, as well as address our class size caps and discussion caps and targets. Because all that had to be ready for registration before we could open up the registration process. So all of that was supported directionally, and that was done, and now we're working through that revised schedule for registration and our discussion caps and targets.
So
So
I think there is a major concern at the middle school right now, as you've seen in emails, and I've heard a lot of noise. I think the word streamline electives on here, and I think it was very misleading and not transparent. I mean, we've changed the elective schedule for our 6th, 7th, 8th graders
Right.
to not allow them to take both a music and a band, or a music and a language option at the same time. And instead, like, forcing these other electives on them that, you know, art or whatever, that aren't necessary. It is a very hot topic amongst parents right now, and they are very irritated. I have a inbound 7th grader, and that was not clear based on the December discussion that there would be major changes to the options presented to parents. I don't know if there's a way at this point to go back and adjust that, or I don't know. I mean, you guys were here at the board table, but
I would caution
I rushed
strongly
it.
against that, because it was the one directive that we discussed quite a bit in December, and you're right, I'm sure it is super inconvenient and super, but we had to get a starting point based on registration timelines. We had to decide something, and this is what we decided after our discussion. So to go back now I'm afraid would muddy the pool, why we never will be able to move forward.
I think the biggest problem is that the decision was made and then it wasn't communicated.
Right.
Because we both sat in the audience and we understood it one way, as it was a discussion point to say that we would come back and have a discussion on this. This wasn't a decision that was made.
On our midterm and longer term cuts that we would have to make, that would be the future discussions that we would have. We needed to get support to adjust enrollment for registration. That was the first thing that we needed to do. We talked about the elective wheel that night and where there would be changes, and that's what we needed to do before we could go to print on those manuals for secondary. So that launched. I mean, that night with that support, we printed
Well, I completely agree with you. We had no idea. We couldn't vote on it, right? We weren't,
Sure.
we weren't the ones to make the decision. But I'm just saying, from someone who sat in the audience, who's now here to sit at the table and let you know, as we sit and we get to read the emails too, we're in the same boat.
And I went back
Completely
and watched it
understand.
too. I think the understanding was that we would, take electives that were underutilized and remove those items, not completely change the middle school structure. That
I mean,
was very
I
unclear.
specifically said, I asked the question, especially about the Spanish immersion, because Spanish immersion was on the list. And what I got was registration will drive student interest, and then we will determine,
For Spanish immersion.
Yes, then we will determine
And also the
what
high
cuts
school.
need to be made. And literally, it's at 49 minutes and 30 seconds. If
Mary?
anybody wants to go back and watch it.
We did differentiate between middle and high school.
We did, but we'd also said that we had to give direction. And I think part of the question about coming back and discussing it is we were supposed to have another study session, and the board agreed that we didn't. We were going to go ahead and give the thumbs up to the very first box up there in order to reduce the full-time equivalents and plan for not only class sizes, but also the classes that were going to be offered. And future discussion on that in a study session was not approved by the whole board. They said, no, just go ahead with this, and this is exactly what was up there. So if there wasn't clarity on it, no, I understand from the audience perspective, but I thought that everyone on the board was clear that we were giving them direction to do this exactly as Dan said.
I think it was
Director
clear,
White,
but the
Vice Chair White.
unintended consequences were not clear.
Yeah,
Like,
I mean,
it wasn't clear
they
that the
removed
students.
key course offerings,
Yeah.
not just electives,
Yeah,
like,
band is a
these
key
are
course.
music and language.
Band.
It's not electives like art, like, these are key courses
Those-
that
those-
students
Band.
aren't having to give up.
Those are electives.
Yes,
I
yeah, they
mean,
are.
They are,
and-
but
And the other thing is that when we started the Spanish immersion, there was always an issue with kids being able to take band and the Spanish immersion at the same time. Now, that's also due to or the cheapest schedule we can be on.
so it's not just Spanish immersion students, it's all.
No, I
700
get it,
students.
but that got thrown into the question too.
And
No,
then-
I get it, it's frustrating, but we had to cut the budget.
And we were minimizing, streamlining, limiting elective opportunities for students, and I think that message was very clear, that it would be very different than the previous model that we had in place, where we had multiple choices for students to have, particularly in the 7th and 8th grade. And to streamline and realize that FTE reduction, I felt very clear that night that it would change the experience for students around the elective offerings.
I guess my concern is that the 3 FTE at the middle school for $381,000, all the problems that's causing, and the concerns, and the impact that is having on our students seems greater than what we had anticipated. And I don't know if that was.
We're gonna lose
it-
enrollment.
Yeah, we're gonna lose enrollment. I mean, but was that thought through, that, $380,000 is gonna have an impact, that the massive amount of impact that it's having?
I would say that cutting $4 million, folks, from our budget is gonna have an impact. We're gonna poke the hornet's nest, no matter which. People can maybe logically understand the math of, we need to cut, and they'll advocate, yep, we need to cut. And we'll also hear, but not the thing that I love most. And if it's not that, and we pull it from something else, then we will have another raise up to say, well, why are you cutting that? That's what we love most, and if we not do that, we do something else. Like, we're at a point, folks, of our budget is very lean, and we've cut $3 million for this current school year. We're cutting $4 million for the foreseeable future every year. We're not gonna have the capacity without having impact to make reductions. We've kept things away from experiences as much as we possibly can for years, and we are at bone and muscle. And this is not something that I take lightly, nor has any of the administration when we're having to make these tough decisions. There's a lot I wouldn't want to have to do, but we have to do state.
And I don't control you guys, but this difficult decision was made in December. And for us to revisit it now,
We can't.
is not gonna do any good, and we really can't. The horse has left the barn. I think we really need to focus on the other bullet points, leading down to that 3.3 number at the bottom. And, yes, it's difficult. It's cutting, it's always difficult. But I really think we need to move past that top bracket. That there's a decision that has been made in the past meeting.
Director White,
Yes.
I would just challenge, do we really feel that as a board, here, sitting here, all 7 of us, that directive aligns with our strategic plan? And if it doesn't, then what are we gonna do? I mean, yes, we can start talking about the rest of this. How do we get our middle school aligned back to our strategic plan of meeting the unique needs of our learners, and also, offering them a rigorous, all the words that are in our strategic plan? How do we do that? Because by doing this, I feel, which again, I wasn't clear that was gonna have the impact that it did, especially with the middle school. My understanding is that we were gonna take those classes that didn't hit that 20,
Yep.
like we talked about Dakota language, we talked about lots of classes that night. I remember the conversation well. And we were basically gonna open enrollment up and say, okay, which classes don't meet that 20 threshold? And those would not be, we would not continue those classes.
That would be in addition to the regular enrollment process that we do every single year. And that night, I was very clear with the board, we need this directional support to be able to go to print for registration. I was very clear. That conversation, Director Axon, I remember that as well, that yes, every year, we have to look at the demand for elective enrollment. And if the demand, and we talked about that night, if we are at a cut enrollment of 20 or so, maybe it was 22, I can't remember.
The number's 20 in
20.
the policy.
So then we'd have to have the conversation of, can we afford that? And that's something that we've been allowing various classes because saying no to kids is a tough thing. You're seeing it. This is our lived reality every single day with enrollment. So we're at a point where we are gonna make tough decisions for what we can actually afford. And Director Atkins, your point is well taken. I've said this as well, that the very thing that we need to deliver on a lot of things that we've gathered as a strat plan, cutting 4 million is gonna compromise every aspect of that. It's not a small cut. So if we don't take it there and we find it somewhere else, it's gonna have an impact. Based on what we just saw earlier tonight, we are so lean, everything's gonna tip that scale. And people are gonna feel it and they're gonna come alive about it. So,
For me, it just feels like these weren't low-demand courses as discussed that were cut. This was music and a language course in middle school, two key electives that all students take. So I guess why the decision to cut, not have the option for music and a language versus like, facts and business and art classes?
And that was discussed as part of the model to give exposure to those courses throughout the middle school to help guide their selection into the high school. And once again, we differentiated between high school. The conversation was very much that 8 FTE would be realized by addressing those class size. The 3 FTE, it was very clear that the model was going to change. Even speaking of the analysis that we did of area middle schools and their offering model, particularly those that were on a 6-period day like us. And that's how we were going to realize the 3 FTE, was to change the offerings in the elective areas. And those are elective areas that include music, physical education. There are some requirements within physical education. There are some requirements of offering within the arts, both visual arts and music, as well as our offerings in the facts and the tech ed area in business.
When, when I'm thinking about all of the work that's been done into figuring out what is being cut here and there, I'm thinking about, in my experience in this district, 26 years, one of the first conversations I ever had with Dr. Edwards when my oldest was starting middle school was, our community is always tax averse. By the time we pass one levy, we're already needing another. These conversations of what is to be, that we're going to be facing if we do not pass another levy, we've been having these conversations for a long time, and now we're here. And I think as hard as they all are to stomach, it's just our reality. And I'd like to see us, we're going to continue to be faced with these really hard choices, and I'd like to see us structure our district that we're not kicking the can to the next levy, because it's so hard, not only on, it's hard on the board, it's hard on the administration, it's hard on our teaching staff, but it's hardest on our students. And what these pains that we're going through, it's our reality, and we could sit and cherry pick and say, why this and not this, but we also have to understand that it's through lots of thought and lots of process by our teams that we are here. And it's, I don't know, none of it feels good, none of it's easy, but going back and saying, why this, why that, when all of these things, they're just our reality.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful to just have a little bit more transparency going forward into exactly what we're changing, because I don't think that discussion probably would have been the same had we had that.
And and I appreciate that, and also it's, you know, we're looking at governance versus management, and so while, yes, many of these things, you know, coming to the board level, it is, you know, the district administration does bring to us to, you know, give our governance, but transparency, sometimes, although I feel like the district in my 2 years compared to being on the board compared to prior, what the administration has done as far as transparency, that we've come so far. And so I respect the transparency comment, and I also feel like knowing every little thing is also hard too, as far as making decisions. So that's just my 2 cents.
Director Berlin, you bring up a really good point about governance versus managerial. And yes, governance, we gave the authorization to cut 3 FTE, but did we managerially know the snowball effect of what was going to happen? And that's where I think, that's where we're questioning, you know, and no, we, you know.
Well, and we're
yeah.
elected on behalf of the
For
people
sure.
in our district, and so had you known, you know, the outrage of the parents, the decision might have been different, right? I think that's the key to me.
Yeah, and I fully agree, Director Mason. I have never worked through budget reductions in any district that I've been a part of where we didn't have outrage.
Yep.
You're just not gonna get people to say, yep, we're good with that, take it from us, versus that. I mean, it's gonna be here, and that's a real bad place to be. And we are choosing between what we want to provide support to our kids and what we want to provide and support our kids. If we said, yeah, we've got all this excess of whatever it might be, yeah, let's cut that. We've been through that exercise in this district back in 2017 to this current date. And
2010, 2012,
yeah, and prior to that,
2014, yeah.
but I'm just, I hear you. And it pains me to be in that reality, but our reality of making the reductions, someone's gonna be very upset. We're just not gonna find 4 million without the hornet's nest getting kicked in some form or fashion. I'd be shocked if we were able to pull that off. It's just not gonna happen. So I like I said, there's cuts here, folks, we don't wanna make. We don't. But if we're gonna balance this budget, we're forced with some really tough decisions.
Yeah, and this is the first year. And I will add that, you know, and quite frankly, you guys weren't on the board at that time, you're sitting in the audience, and the board members do get the agenda ahead of time. We have ample opportunity to sit down with the superintendent and ask the questions. And, you know, we knew that this was gonna, you know, there was gonna be some impacts that probably needed to be discussed further. Probably we're gonna end up in the same place, because they needed the direction as soon as possible. But we did have another, and you guys weren't honest, you couldn't vote, but we did have another study session to do just that, to make sure everyone was 100% on board, and understood the impact. And also understood we didn't have a lot of other options. But because everyone at the board agreed that they understood this and they had their opportunity to meet with the administration, we opted not to have the extra study session because we basically would have ended up in the same spot. So that's when we gave it direction, but understanding that it's a lot different sitting at the table and having that ability to meet with administration and ask those questions one-on-one from our previous knowledge of everything that had been in motion, and sitting in the audience is a different perspective. And so I want to recognize that. I understand the you know, why people are upset, but you know, and unfortunately, you weren't sitting there able to sit at the table and get that information and stuff like that. It is different when you're sitting in the audience.
Yeah, no, I had
Yeah.
just asked a couple of board members and they
Yeah.
weren't aware of that, so.
Well, unfortunately, with kids in the district too, Mary, I mean, Director France, we're the ones that are living the consequences, right? We're the ones that feel the real pain, so.
I feel the pain too. That's not
so-
fair. That's not a fair
But
statement.
but it's reality, because we all have friends and that have kids in the district, and now, you know.
So it means less
so-
to her than it
No,
does
no,
to
no,
you
but I'm
because she
just
doesn't have
saying-
kids in the district?
What I'm
That's
saying
not
is,
fair.
well,
So
That's
this is,
reality.
this
it's
this
real.
is
So I think we
exactly,
need to move, forward.
I think we need to move forward because these are the decisions that the 6 of you were elected and I was appointed to make. And they're not going to be easy, but we have to make them despite all of these outlying influences that just come based on the station of life that we're in. And I would encourage lots of questions about these next bullets, about maybe the things you're talking about, Jessica. I have, what about these sped paras? These are some of our neediest students. How does that, has that been thought through? Is that gonna cause, what are the other costs that aren't maybe dollar related, that, what kind of pressures is gonna put on the staff? So though, I don't want anybody to feel like we're backed up against a wall tonight. Dr. Thomas indicated we have a little time to, this is more of almost as much of a discovery as a decision tonight, to get those deeper questions answered, so that if we decide, you know what, we're gonna change this, or we're gonna move forward with that, we're all have a much clearer understanding of what these cuts actually mean, so that you get asked about it, yeah, you're right, this is what's gonna happen, but where we landed. So I would entertain that kind of discussion moving forward. And I guess I can start. The sped paras, that's kind of a,
We'll walk through and contextualize each of these brackets. So,
Am I just to go?
Yep.
You know, like, I think, we've all talked about, right, there's money and there's a cross subsidy and special ed has a piece of that and skin in the game too in that general fund. And so this, what I put forward really doesn't, I'm not concerned. So as the director of special education, cutting 3 resource paras really isn't that concerning to me. Right now, we are staffed at our elementary at like 1 to 9. So for every 9 resource students, there's a para. I'm just suggesting we just increase that a little bit, so there'd still be like 13. At our middle school, we're at 25, and at our high school, we're at 40, right? So this isn't a huge, I think we can still meet student needs. If we can't, right, then I come forward and I explain why I can't move anything, and because we will always meet the needs of our kids, always. We're not going to not meet them. But I am not afraid at this point by reducing just a few elementary paras likely is going to significantly change our ability to provide a free and appropriate education for our kids.
And where does that put us with our neighboring districts
It
at the
puts us
elementary?
right in the middle. I mean, we're not the highest staff, we're not the lowest staffed. We're on the lower end, but not the lowest. I mean, there's districts that are staffing, 1 to 20, or only staffing when they have needs. There's some high schools that don't have any resource paras. So it really is dependent on the model of service delivery that we give, so that we can look at how we're delivering service. My team and I have been working very hard also at, what is the job of a para? And are we doing a very good job at what skill is being developed and are we pulling back or are we creating longer term dependency? So we're trying to be a lot more cognizant of that too. So, I mean, all of these things are definitely possible to do.
And Michelle, I just want to add to the last line on there, just to provide some context to that, and if you can please chime in on that. In our recent contract negotiations with MSEA, which is the bargaining unit that oversees SPED paras, we added an additional 15 minutes per day to provide them time for their team and for IEP review minutes. We already had some SPED paras that had that and then some built into the day where they weren't directly servicing students. They had this additional time in place. So with those two overlapping, this is where we can find some efficiencies in reducing those hours. So we aren't reducing the FTE or the number of supports in those buildings. We're just reducing the hours assigned to each of those individuals that they're still there for the entire instructional day, plus what we have to do plus the statutory requirements that were passed down a couple years ago, and then the contract that we agreed to. So that line, I just want to be clear, that's why there's not an FTE around it. It's just to realign those SPED paras to have a similar scheduling to other SPED paras.
Yeah, and the majority of that actually is because there's 2 less student contact days, so the paras aren't working those days. So that's the biggest chunk of that $40,000.
And I do think, Michelle, that's on the
Is that
next
on the
page.
second one?
Yeah,
Oh,
that is
okay.
specific to the hours.
I was gonna say, that was a big one. Okay, so yeah, that's just then,
The hours.
just readjusting a few hours. And that high school one is a student aging out who needed a 1-to-1. So it's also just looking at, those things too.
Michelle, I've got a quick question. I think it's quick. The combination of the increased number of SPED students that we are recognizing, combined with the extraordinary amount that I've witnessed of paperwork that is required. And so when I see a reduction, I also see an increased amount of that non-instructional time that they should be spending, planning and doing all that, as well as the increased number of students and the paperwork. And it does concern me. To finish that off, if we eliminate 3 positions and we try to hire back, paras they're not a dime a dozen out there. I mean, it's a hard job, and we've had historically a hard time attracting them. And once you've laid off and hired back, there is a morale issue too, or a reputation. So when I put all that together, I'm wondering about the residual effect.
Yep. So we either hired or transferred 34 paras this year. I mean, we have such a turnover that the reduction wouldn't be on laying you off. It would just be we simply wouldn't hire 3 paras, or we just wouldn't fill 3 paras that leave. So that's really a non-issue there. Our numbers are growing, yes, but they're growing mainly in our center-based programs. So we are up about, I just looked a little bit at numbers. From 22-23 school year to 23-24, we really only had an increase of about 20 resource students. So you put that across K-12, that's not a big huge strain on the system. But we had an additional 15 students in center-based programming, which is like 2 classrooms, right? And that's like 2 teachers and 8 paras. I mean, that's the bigger, when the needs are intense like that, that's where we're having our bigger increase. And we're having that same sort of increase next year. Right now, the way things sit, if we trend exactly the same, we'll probably end up with about 20 more resource students K-12 than we do this year. So again, not a huge, that's my guesstimate based on just looking back historically. Again, not a huge strain, right? Considering the amount of teachers and staff that we have.
So I want to just play on something you said. We're cutting here for the 181,000.
Yep.
But you also said we're increasing at the high school center-based, or did I misunderstand that?
We're increasing center-based across the
Okay.
district. So, we're going to have to reallocate and see, what we can do there. Once I know numbers, the hard thing is the elementary kids coming in to know what type of programming they need. If I can spread them across life skills, that's a lot easier than ones that need like a very specific program that's already really full, like our CID program, right? So I don't know those answers yet because they're too little. We're gonna know a lot more in the next few months on where those students land.
Did we reflect the potential increase in the center base in our budget?
No, not right now. We're looking to try to do it with the resources that we have. And depending on where they land, we might be able to do that. If not, then of course that'll be a different discussion.
Something you said brought a question to my mind, and I think I understood it. When the other night at the Coffee and Conversations, which you were a part of, and we talked about special education funding and how you said special education is such a large umbrella and there's so many different categories underneath it. So when we look at, and I think you just hit on this, to your point, you know, what individual kids need.
Yep.
So we're not worried at all about, you know, for lack of a better example, this category being, having a lot of students that need the help, and this category maybe not so much. Like, do we know where these
So we
reductions
serve,
would fall?
yeah, we serve based on need, not on categorical disability. So a student could, let's say, have autism. They might be able to be served in resource, they might need our CID program, or they might need life skills, right? It's totally dependent on each child is so individual, so we look at their needs and then program. It doesn't really matter what their categorical disability label is. Does that answer that?
I think so, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any others regarding the special ed parents?
I'm just gonna state, you know, we've worked really hard in the last 2 years since I've been on the board to actually up the paras. I mean, I remember when we started walking through classrooms, and this is an area that's a little near and dear to my heart with one of my students having a para. This cut, I appreciate what you're saying, but it really, I don't know if I support it. Mostly because when we look at things like child-based budgeting, and you build up the need from the classroom up, this doesn't align with where I would like to see us make cuts as a district. I think we have other places that will just have less of an impact on our students. And so like I said, I appreciate the efficiencies, and if there's efficiencies in the high school, that's great. But it's, for me personally, it's really concerning to make any additional cuts that hit this close home to our students.
And I understand, I do understand what you're saying. And again, I want to reiterate, I will always ensure that our students in special ed get their IEP needs met and they get a free and appropriate public education. So I think it's like what Representative Bakeberg was saying, there's appropriate, maybe there's like a little more than appropriate. And we might have some areas like that, and that's what I'm trying to find out, right? I want to be, you know, very fiscally responsible with our resources, because special ed is never whole. Right? There's always that cross-subsidy piece, and so this is a way that we can, it's a small amount of money, but as we can, you know, if you add all these up, they're all small amounts of money that are adding up to a bigger amount, because we don't have anywhere that we can just make a sweeping, we'll just take that and come up with our money. So I'm confident that we can still meet the students' needs, or at least it's definitely worth the try, and again, I'll be the first one back here begging if we can't. So, but I really feel like we're gonna be okay.
I think my question was, I think you mostly answered it, but just how you're forecasting the number of students that will require paras, and also did you factor in the fact that we may be increasing class sizes slightly in the elementaries, you know, and those teachers would have, you know, potentially another student or two to support, and what is the impact?
So on average, that's just, you know, there is no rhyme or reason to para staffing. So even talking with all my directors across our region and state, hey, who's got a good para model for resource, right? There's nothing that is in statute that says this is how you staff it. So it's really, some of it's based on just expectations and what people are used to, whether that's general ed staff or special ed teachers. So we've been doing fine with where it's at. And yes, you know, every time that we are taking away any supports in general ed, it could impact special ed too. But in the end, I think I'll just reiterate what everybody here has said. My colleagues said, this is where we're at. So I feel like we'll still meet the needs of our students. Will it be felt? Yep. But my responsibility as the Director of Special Education is to ensure that the students' IEP needs are met, and I will still continue to do that.
Yeah. No, I asked because obviously we utilize the para and it wasn't something that like, I didn't know we needed until, I got into the school and saw it. And then again in middle school, after she had it in elementary, I didn't know and realize until you see the day-to-day. And so I would expect to probably get a lot of those last minute requests for paras, right?
Sometimes, yeah, but we do, as I said, we're really working on, so if I'm utilizing these 4 paras over here with these, 12 kids, have 4 of them mastered some of the skills that they're there for, and now I can shift that support. So I'm not really looking at para support as this year-long or lifelong kind of thing for a student. It's where can we support you to learn the skill, and then fade that support, and then go help the next student that needs to learn the skill for some time. So we're getting a little bit better about that, and that's something that we'll continue to do.
And then Director Mason, to piggyback off of that with the class sizes, I think you mentioned it perfectly, they may or may not increase by 2. So just to reiterate for the community, so we're really clear on that, our targets and our discussion caps increase by 2, but depending on where student enrollment falls, that you might have a 4th grade section that this year was 26 and next year's gonna be 24. So it might be a little confusing for folks that, well, you said you increased by 2, but this is 2 less than my older had. So I just want to be really clear on that we're increasing our class size targets and discussion caps by 2, but that does not automatically mean every class is going to increase by that much. And it will be, just like every year, we'll have our low spots, we'll have our hot spots, and we'll have to address those accordingly. So I thought you brought up a really great point, I just wanted to emphasize that, so that's clear for the community.
Okay, any edit on this? Okay. Moving on to the MinCaps move. Questions around that?
So just real quick before we dive in, obviously this is, as you can see, the cost associated with that, that is lease levy, that space. And as we looked to gain efficiencies in a variety of ways, this is one of them, as well as the transportation associated with getting some students to that facility. And bringing that program into the high school and the resulting programmatic administrative structure that's in place at the high school, given our size, felt that a reduction in the overall assistant principal team at the high school could be realized in this move as well.
Also been talking with Director Powers and his team about the cost of the move, and that is something that we feel we can manage and handle in-house. There's very little that we would have to do to refab spaces, and also has confidence that the team can address any of those kind of changes. So nothing that's real substantive in terms of structural changes to adapt the MinCaps program into the high school. And the things that we may have to address, they would be taking the primary lead on that. They may have to sub certain things out, but for the majority of the case, retrofitting that space or remodeling spaces is something that Dan Powers and his team would be able to address. Dan, is there anything more? Is that good?
No, I thought that was correct.
Okay, all right.
Would that be maintaining all the same tracks that we currently have in the MinCaps program?
That would be driven by the registration process. At this point, the preliminary interest in MinCaps is maintained and actually grown over where we were last year at this time. So we anticipate, and part of that is making up for, would allow us to make up for the lost students from the Farmington program by this move. The board was meeting tonight as well to review their reductions. And so we would, we do believe that at least the initial interest in MinCaps, students are going through that registration process right now and will be throughout the first couple of weeks of February. We'll know more specifically about those that are in fact either eligible for participation or interested in that participation. But I think we are definitely encouraged by that interest.
And can you help me understand, I'm still not clear on the MinCaps move to PLHS $145,000. If the lease is $30,000, and I know there's loss of revenue from Farmington, and there's a lot of behind the scenes type of numbers, but how did you come up with the number of $145,000?
So this is the monthly cost that it cost us for administrative taxes and maintenance. So there's two parts to the invoice that we get from the lease company. The lease part, the actual rent of is under lease levy, which will now,
That's why it's not included there.
right,
Okay.
yeah.
Including the internet that we had specially set up for MinCaps over there, that's part of the utilities.
Yep, and Director Powers has worked with Director Milazzo to talk about moving all of the equipment, and they feel that they have it under control, that there's space there, they have the capacity to do that in-house, so it will be a minimal cost.
Any trickle-down retrofitting in order to dedicate a part of a pod or a whole pod to MinCaps?
No, we feel like the D pod specifically, that the new part of the D pod has underutilized spaces that were set up originally in the build for science, to accommodate science classrooms. And so there is sufficient space.
And you're thinking long-term?
Yeah.
Yep.
We're not gonna garage it anytime soon.
No, definitely not. Just for context, the high school, when the addition was put on, was built for 3,200 students. We have under 2,800 students now going into the upcoming school year. I'm remembering back to the earlier slides on enrollment, so.
Can you walk me through the reduction of the administrator? So this, I hate to be identifying, but it can't be helped. This person was an assistant principal / MinCaps coordinator. So this reduction, help me understand or walk through how to have this program without somebody leading it.
Yep.
And then, so it's almost like we're reducing two roles almost because this person did a little bit of both. So walk me through, walk
Sure.
us through
So
what this means.
part of our reductions last year, you might recall, we previously had a
Right.
coordinator at that site. We felt at that point that we were needing to change our administrative model and take an administrator, an assistant principal specifically from the high school and reassign a significant portion, about approximately an 80-20 portion. So currently that person has a 20% responsibility. That position has a 20% responsibility in Prior Lake High School proper, and then the remaining portion of the person's responsibility is to support the off-site, the satellite campus, if you will. With that satellite campus and the students who are already enrolled in Prior Lake High School for the remainder of their day in most cases, coming back to the Prior Lake High School, we took a look at our administrative structure and did, frankly, comparison of similar-sized high schools and the administrative structure in place at Prior Lake High School as compared to a similar-sized high school. And fortunately, that resulted in us looking to identify that we could get by with one less administrator. So we would have a principal and 3 assistant principals as opposed to 4 assistant principals. And that will then be needing to be absorbed within the remaining administrative team to provide that in-school support to the program that's now going to be housed there.
So, so like the counselors, for example, the school counselors at the high school. So did they already have the MinCap students under their purview already?
They are on their caseload, yes.
So that hasn't changed? That's always been the case, correct?
That is correct. And frankly, there will be some efficiencies gained within that. Now those students will be housed at Prior Lake High School for their entire day, providing easier access for both the counselors and the students. Counselors to the students and the students to the counselors. And so those efficiencies, I guess for lack of a better term, that will be gained caused us to be able to look at whether or not this was a move that could give us greater efficiency as well with administrative costs.
And then having the students there for an extra couple of hours a day than before. So are there anything, is there plenty of parking for these students? Is there, food service, things like that where admittedly, since I don't have high school aged kids, this, I'm probably asking silly questions.
Well,
but
they
training
currently have
residual.
parking. Yep, they currently.
So they're all set over that.
Yep.
they're
Structurally, they
umbrella,
can take
they're-
Structurally, they can, and the capacity of the child nutrition services area certainly, once again, was built. The school itself structurally was built for 3,200 students, including the servery and things. So those students will remain there for their entire day unless they choose other options as well.
Anything else around mid-caps? Okay. We'll move on to the next line, eliminating online and third grade SAGE.
So I'm going to start with the online and just speak, this is a program that we put in place following the pandemic. And we began it as a 6-12. We cut out the 6-8 portion of it because the demand just wasn't there. We maintained the 9-12 and actually shifted some FTE in recent years to the current model. We have been engaged in looking at the, I'll call it return on investment with the students. Certainly it's a program that works for certain students and certain families. Do we risk losing some of those students in this? I think there is that inherent risk here, but we also are going to be working with those families because that program is led by our Bridges ALC coordinator, Mr. Brown. So he is going to be working to see if many of those students or any of those students are interested in returning to either Prior Lake High School or Bridges ALC for their 9-12 experience. And I think we're anticipating that we would see some of that. We are also anticipating that we might likely lose a few students who really that is the model that they find success. But again, we did do some evaluation of the success, looking at grades, credits earned, attendance, et cetera, associated with students enrolled in Laker Online, and we just didn't feel like the investment that we were making was getting that return. Those students, unfortunately. We do know there's a niche student population that does benefit from that experience, and there are options for those students.
Any students?
We currently have, I think in the mid-50s, 57 is a number that's ringing a bell for me.
Is there any partnership with like Southwest Metro to offer like as an
That is a
alternative?
possible partner with our collaborative agreement that we already have. That would be nominal in terms of support. I think also given the performance of the students and the lack of credits that some of these students are having based upon the unsuccessful completion of some of the courses, they also really fit the model of an ALC. And they're gonna need that recovery at some point. And so we may be looking at both between the ALC as well as Southwest Metro as our primary partner, because we already have a relationship and it's part of our contract. There are some other areas that Dan and I are exploring, but at this time, I think we're gonna just really be looking internally with our own ALC and then our natural collaboration with Southwest Metro as our primary entry points for support.
Is there possibility for them to shift to North Star Alliance?
Just
North Star
different-
Online.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Those are some of the options that we might
Yeah.
lose some, right? If they, the
So we
student that's
lose funding if they go to
Yes.
North Star.
correct, and when you see students who are taking online and doing well, that's where we're gonna see the North Star. The students who are struggling with their success in online, I think those are the ones that we're gonna be able to maintain But if you're truly looking for online because of whatever it is and that's how you thrive, then by all means, that might be an option. But we're gonna be posing our intermediate partner as well. Because with that partnership, unlike Student Star Online, which is the dominant provider with most online in the metro here, we actually get a portion of the ADM back because of our collaborative relationship with with intermediate district Southwest Metro. So that would be financially advantageous for them to take it there. And they also have additional resources and support structures within Southwest Metro as well.
Dr. Thomas, if I may ask, at the amount of time that I've spent at the ALC, I see a lot of kids over there doing online,
They do,
using that as a
Yep.
facility for backup
as a hub
support.
station.
Right, and it works really, really well for them.
Yep.
So
That would be
is-
our preference.
That is gonna be our initial, work, is to identify and show those students, hopefully, that this could be a home for them.
Okay.
I feel like I saw it somewhere and now I can't find it, but I think a large portion of the enrollment currently is seniors, right? Junior,
Junior, seniors primarily, we have a few 9th and 10th graders, but it progressively increases as they,
Will you phase this out or just it's done?
at this point, the proposal is that it would be done. Yep.
And then the eliminate third grade SAGE.
So one of the things that we are looking at with that is, as we have seen over recent years, the number of students who are meeting our initial criteria, or our criteria that we had traditionally to participate, has gone down. And we have been looking at this for a number of years, and we have been increasing in order to fill a section. We have been lowering that threshold than our traditional threshold was at, and we have been seeing that, like I say, over a number of years. So as we look above to the discussion caps, raising at other sections across the district in other classrooms, we looked at this as a potential efficiency that might be able to be gained, and we are finding participation rate with that lowered criteria of students. More students are choosing to stay in their home neighborhood school than traditionally have taken advantage of the SAGE opportunity. Last year, I think it was 49% of the students who were identified chose to stay at their neighborhood school.
49% took the
Or
invitation.
took the invitation to go. So 51% of the students chose to stay at their neighborhood school, and again, that was after lowering our threshold. And we've done some comparison. I don't know, JC, if you want to step forward and talk a little bit about.
Sure. Good evening. We ran some preliminary numbers on SAGE identification. Last year, we, for the 23-24 school year, had 32 students in the SAGE program. Again, with that lowering of that criteria, if we had used, we looked at some surrounding districts criteria, and if we had used that surrounding districts criteria in Lakeville, we would, of those 32 students, only 3 would have qualified. In Okehennepin, only 3 would have qualified. In Minnetonka, only 8 would have qualified. So of those 32, it really, in terms of your typical gifted programming, it's really only 3 to 8 of those students that would typically qualify for gifted programming in a different district. This year so far, we have done the initial screening of the students, and so we've gone to the 98th and 99th percentile. Again, last year 32 students met that criteria. This year we have 17 students meeting that criteria. So again, if we looked at the districts criteria, we would have significantly less than a class of gifted students per cohort.
And when you say criteria, you're talking about the code COJAT?
COGAT.
COGAT, and teacher recommendation, is there more than that?
Teacher recommendation is not a criteria.
The criteria?
It can, if there is,
Recommendation.
it can give us a different look on a certain student, but
Yeah.
that doesn't change the criteria.
It's the test.
It's the, yeah, it's this, yes.
Okay.
So how are you getting from 3 to 32?
Well, we,
Well, explain you're lowering the bar. That's a lot of lowering the bar.
well, the program has, I mean, we're, for efficiency's sake, we are basically, like, we're screening every student, and then we're taking students from the top down until we fill a section. Because for staffing efficiency's sake, if we don't go down, then we won't have a section. And because, to Dr. Edwards' point, we only have 49% of families opting into SAGE if they get an invitation, it basically is a numbers game to go down the list until you've completed a section of students. So just as a comparison, we wanted to just demonstrate where we have gone down in terms of I think there's some advantages to expanding criteria because you might give a student an opportunity. I mean, it's one test, so you're giving a potentially student an opportunity that wouldn't necessarily have that, or, you know, we're being a little bit more flexible in that criteria. But we just wanted to compare, like in some surrounding districts, where that cut would leave us in terms of our student
Sure.
registration.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I think we have a retest policy in the district, so I don't think judging, SAGE based on one test in 3rd grade is really, equaling the criteria, to say that. So I agree with you 100% on that.
Yeah,
I don't
and for
think-
better or for worse, that is how districts,
I understand, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm agreeing with
Screen
you,
for
right?
students,
Giving
yeah.
more students the opportunity is absolutely the thing.
yeah.
And, ultimately, we've already cut, advanced math in middle school. So I think cutting it anywhere else is not an option. So you will not have my support at all for cutting anything else. If anything, we need to be looking at bringing advanced math back into middle school and to every other grade before we talk about anything else.
So currently our, sorry, I have the same cough, cold that everybody else has.
It's all,
Currently, our 5th grade SAGE students are taking 5th grade math. So they are, and we're seeing we're seeing extremely high growth in their FastBridge data. And Dr. Edwards can speak to the course offering shifts from last year. But this doesn't, this recommendation doesn't eliminate opportunities for students to access any material. They still can, grade accelerate or any other thing that they need to do in order to meet their needs. And we know that half the students that get invited to SAGE stay in their home schools. And,
understandable, yes.
yeah, so.
I would just like to add, I had a SAGE kid, and he's now an electrical engineer. These kids in this program are some of the most unique learning, brightest, autistic, ADHD, twice exceptional kids. And if you take away this program, which I am absolutely not in support of, because one, it goes against our strategic plan of academic excellence, which students receive challenging, rigorous, and relevant instruction for their unique learning needs and goals. It's our #1 priority. It's literally like, what are we doing? And I'll be really honest and candid in my conversation here. In the last 5 or 6 years, we as a district and all of our equity initiatives have been implemented in our district, whether it's Bridges Math or CPM Math, we are not meeting the needs, the uniquely learning needs of our students. And what we should really be doing as a district with these budget cuts and budget reallocations is looking to see how can we bring back a synergy type of program because that's what we had when my kids were little. And we've done everything to spiral into this equity and teaching to the middle, and we're losing kids, and we're hurting kids, because we're not challenging them in first grade and second grade. So no, they're not gonna qualify for this test, because we're not even getting them there when they're young. And kids are not getting dumber. We as a district are disappointing our kids. And so I absolutely do not support
I
this at all.
100% agree with you. I do not support this cut without some sort of alternative, which I think is actually the better approach. We need to add back advanced courses to our upper elementary and middle school students. It is ridiculous that we don't have it. Yeah, I agree with you. Like, children didn't get less intelligent over the last 5 years. What are we doing wrong, right? Like, why are they not able to test? That should be the question I'm asking. You know, I think we need to, just like we provide services for kids that need extra special education, we need to provide some sort of curriculum for students that are gifted and talented, and we are absolutely lacking in that area right now. You know, and I also think the transparency here, it was a big issue. There are a lot of fifth grade SAGE parents that didn't even know that their math was the same curriculum as the regular fifth grade students. They weren't even aware that was happening. You know, I think the whole base of fifth, sixth, seventh graders, they weren't aware that advanced math wasn't going to be an option until last week when that registration came out, and that happened before the budget cuts. It's a huge concern. I am not in support of removing any advanced programming without some sort of alternative.
So, let's say the ultimate decision of the board is to eliminate SAGE. What could
Third
be?
grade only.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
third grade only.
Yeah.
What other options in the system could be available to students that are gifted? I mean, are they left to their own? Is there, I mean, I can understand cutting it, but is there some kind of an internal alternative to SAGE? I don't want to get hooked on the cutting of SAGE. You're still going to have gifted kids. What do you do with them if you don't have this?
Well, we do have a policy around curriculum acceleration. That policy can be applied to specific a curricular area or a grade level acceleration. If truly we have students that need that criteria, we assess students, and we have, and we continue to assess students when those students are brought to our attention either by their family or in some cases by our internal staff identifying students who might need to be considered for that. And we apply that, and we do apply that policy and look at those unique situations. So that would be something that we would continue to do. And
would you still identify them in the same way if a parent wanted to take the same
because
test?
we do have students,
So
for example, who have taken.
What identifies those students in the classroom? Because I see this firsthand. You have a student that's getting, you know, we got emails on this, right? You use 100% on every test and they're bored. No, they've never been recommended for grade acceleration. So what drives
Triggers that?
Yes.
Yeah, and typically it is the parents who are.
So we just have to advocate for our students.
Who are approaching the school for an assessment on that, and that is done by our remaining differentiation specialist, who the policy calls for how that process is done, specifically looking at the individual unique skills of that student.
She does work with teachers will bring forth individual students as well who, you know, the teacher has identified as possible grade acceleration. She will go and assess that student and see if they're eligible for curriculum acceleration.
So I can understand the curriculum acceleration piece of art. The part that you're not talking about or nobody's talking about is the social emotional piece of these students. I can tell you from, again, having a SAGE student, social and emotionally, he would have been a disaster in a grade skip situation. Because these kids, you have to remember, these kids are not, they think differently. and they thrive with their peers who are also all electrical engineers and structural engineers and all these super bright kids who thrive off of each other. And so, I mean, if we're looking at getting rid of third grade stage, then what's the point of having fourth and fifth grade stage? I mean, it just, to me, it's a snowball effect of we're going in the opposite direction of what our strategic plan and what our community, I mean, our community did not come up and say, get rid of advanced learning and get rid of SAGE. They said the exact opposite. They want challenging, rigorous, and relevant instruction for the unique learning needs and goals.
I have a question. So, and I've been hearing about this for years. So, the Colgate test, is that still going to be given to everyone in third grade no matter what? Or does that?
I think it's on the table. I mean, that's part of the cost reduction, is we do spend quite a bit on that assessment. We screen every student, and then we do the full assessment on students who meet a minimum threshold for the follow-up. So part of the cost of SAGE is that assessment.
Okay,
It's
so.
about $17,000, I believe, a year.
Okay, so that's part of the cost savings here.
And
Is that, I'm sorry, is that actually part of the 127,000 or no?
I don't think it's
Okay.
part of that, no.
So here's, I mean, I'm trying to understand the numbers, and I know I've heard about this for years, and, you know, again, I had kids too at one time that went through this. What I heard you say is that if we go by the threshold that we should be going by, we wouldn't have enough kids in third grade anyways for the class.
Yeah, and that's been the case for a number of years.
Yes, and I've heard that. And we've had the same problem with advanced math, that when they tested them, really only 7 or 8 kids in the advanced math were actually advanced, or let's say a class of 30. So the whole class kind of got brought back. And that's been going on for years too, from what I understand. And, you know, and we have parents who want their kids in advance, whether they belong there or not. We've had that issue too. Kid struggles, you know, there's all sorts of stuff. So there's pros and cons on both sides of that. But if we don't have the kids to make the class in third grade anyways at the normal threshold, if we don't do this, will we then test again in third grade to see if there's kids that make it in fourth grade for SAGE? Or how are we going to make that determination for the next year? Because we're really only talking about 1 year in which we haven't had enough kids that made the threshold. So it is a cost-benefit analysis at this point, of providing we provide those kids, like Chair White just said, with other supports. But do we make up for that in fourth grade if we just give up third grade? That's what I'm trying to understand, is how do you then?
To retest them?
Correct me if
Yeah, and how
I'm
do you,
wrong, but the
we're talking
suggestion
about
is to-
1 year here, and I'm wondering what happens next time.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the suggestion is to phase out SAGE starting with third grade. So it wouldn't be to just eliminate third grade SAGE, it would be to start with third grade, stop the program, but not, you wouldn't remove students from
Continue
fourth
the
and fifth
commitment to
grade.
the students who are currently.
Yeah,
in
you
the
would keep
program.
the students in that are already
So
there.
then my other question is going back to what Chair White said. When kids are bored in class, they're gonna act out. They don't always get 100% and A's and stuff like that. Sometimes they're just bored and they don't try. What other supports are we planning? And I understand we've been cutting differentiation specialists for a while, but I mean, you're gonna end up losing students that way too. Granted, a lot of them wouldn't make it into maybe another school, like you just said when you did the comparison, but we are still gonna potentially look to it, because even before, when we had the issue with kids that weren't necessarily belonging in SAGE but were put in there, we had parents getting frustrated and moving out to the magnet school in Burnsville before they closed. And I remember that whole thing early on in my years here. So I'm just being blunt here. I mean, we're always going to have some kids that are gifted, so we need to provide supports for them, or we just need to tell them this isn't the place to come. I mean, and I hate to do that.
And I think it would be similar to the supports we provide currently for students who do test at that high level and stay at their home buildings. I mean, it's really up to the teacher and the peer coach and the one differentiation specialist to support that teacher in differentiating
It's a lot
Speaking
on
from a-
one differentiation specialist.
Speaking from personal experience, like there isn't any support for that. So last year, they were able to go for the stage class. There's nothing this year for those students. But I also was wondering, the 127,000, what is that cost consist of? Because those students still have to be taught by teachers somewhere in the district, assuming they stay. What is that?
So that is a teaching position that would no longer exist. Those students would be, again, absorbed into their, in most cases, their resident school, or in all cases, their community neighborhood school, and would be part of the overall raising of the cap for the discussion cap and the targets. So more efficiency. I mean, ultimately, it's a efficiency of their staffing in third grade.
So just a long time ago, we used to have something like a seminar where the kids that were accelerating or teacher recommended would go out and do a special class and have like a science project, a seminar discussion, something would be more in advance, an advanced book to read, things like that. That wasn't part of SAGE though, I can't remember what it was called.
No, it was Synergy.
Synergy, that was
Those
only.
were Synergy specialists that were approximate, it was more than
Synergy.
0.5 FTE at each of our sites at that time. I don't recall the specifics, and this was probably 8 to 10 years ago now, when those positions existed. Again, back to the historical context of our ongoing reductions, not just in that area, but in other areas as well.
We're not replacing Synergy, obviously, we got rid of Synergy and, yeah, okay.
Well, and I would just say my son was in Synergy in second grade and first and second grade, and it totally did not meet the needs of his learning. I mean, SAGE was a godsend for him, and it's the only reason he thrived in third, fourth, and fifth. And then unfortunately, I pulled him out to a charter school because we did not have no continuation at that time into the middle school. And so I think we have, as a board, have to decide, are we going to live up to our strategic plan that was, again, built by our community, or are we going to become a district of teach to the middle?
Yeah,
No, that's not what our community said, so.
I
I mean, it's no different than having a Spanish immersion program.
I would ask if there's a way for, if everyone supports this, is there a way for us to just do some cost analysis and getting back some advanced course offerings for these students back into their schools, if this is what, as an alternative?
Well, I think,
We can
Director
make other
Zumbush.
cuts too.
sorry,
Yeah, no.
she said it correctly, right? This is just the beginning. This is step one to eliminate third grade SAGE, and then fourth grade, and then we're gonna eliminate fifth grade. So, is that correct?
Well, that would be a logical
Thing.
next
So-
step in a multi-year.
Or it, so let me just weigh in a little bit on some pieces here, because so we know the reality that we just spoke of. We're not generating enough at our normal cut score, so to speak. So we've had to just enroll, and that cut score continues to go down. So the integrity of the program has shifted, okay? And so we need to be okay with that and call it for what it is, because it's not SAGE, of how we envision SAGE to be, based upon allowing it to open up for different levels that historically have never been part of that program. So, and Director Johnson, to your point, I think that's a good thing too. But I think we need to be real with ourselves then what is this? Secondly, a couple of you had mentioned the structural challenge of the one differentiation specialist to come in and then provide that support and coordinate, unique lessons. And it's just getting to the essence of the crux of our issue. We don't have resources to do what we would love to continue to do. These were the messages on the levy trail, we get it. We understand where we're at right now from a financial standpoint. Something's gonna give, and if it's not this, that might be the case, we're gonna pull from somewhere that's gonna pinch, it's gonna hurt. I don't know if our community understood, like, they want all of this, all of these experiences, and these experiences come with a cost. And I don't know if that's totally understood. Because to say, I want the moon, but I'm not willing to pay for that, that's the challenge, that's before us. Are there ways to always find efficiencies and things of that nature? There are. I don't disagree with that. But I hope you all can understand the structural challenge in just that sheer position that a couple of you mentioned. Like, you didn't say this, but I heard the unspoken question, how would she be able to do all that? It's a fair question. I don't know how she does that. I don't know how our K-12 content specialist does what she does, and we expect that these great things will come of this when you have one for 9,000 students. It's like a setup. So when we talk about where we say, okay, take it away, don't impact the kids. Well, let's cut differentiation specialists. Now look where that has brought us to this day when we did that, because we kept it away from the kids for years. And we've got this cumulative effect, folks, where there's only so much we can keep away from the kids before everything is being impacted. And so I appreciate this discussion that we're leaning into, and I love to push what you are offering us to consider that we'll kind of take back and review. And I also understand the politic. I'm just going to put that on the table. Gifted or not, there's a selling factor for having this type of a program that's an attractant. It's marketing 101. So that's a draw. Okay, and it's meeting needs too. But somebody who might be new is looking and they say, oh, you've got that program. Well, that district doesn't have that program, so I'm going to go here. There's a politic on that one. That politic comes with the cost of an FTE. So if we do this, which is, if this is the will of the board, we're going to have to find $130,000 somewhere. And
I think that's we
And
need to
that's
get
what
there,
we're
because
asking.
I think that's,
I understand.
This is year one of the cuts
Yeah,
too, so.
Yes, and I understand this, folks.
this
So
is just one, we have more to go through, so.
I hear you, and so, yeah, more years to go through.
No, I mean more in the slideshow, because
Yeah,
I think,
yep.
I mean, myself as a board director, I think we're challenged to optimize resources. You brought these ideas to the table. As a board director, I have some other ideas I'd like to present. So
Okay.
if we can get through
Yes,
this.
gotcha.
Yep, you know
Yeah,
what
that's
I
fair,
mean?
that's
So-
fair.
So I would only, if we're ready to move on, I'd like maybe high level, if this is the direction the board ends up going in year 2 and 3, I'm not super crazy about it, but I'd have to be made comfortable that you have some kind of a plan in place. Because I don't want to get hooked on Save. We have individual kids with individual needs. What are we going to do with them if we don't have this? And I don't want to just say, well, we could do that. I'd like a relatively well thought out plan. But what are you going to do, kid to kid? Just so we know that they're not just being lost in the weeds because we don't have this program anymore. I don't want to be married to this because it's a
I
program.
understand, because there's kids who are not enrolled in SAGE right now. I mean, our teachers are meeting unique needs in our classrooms, you know? It's becoming increasingly challenging to do that, based on the variation of needs and things of that nature, but our teachers are committed to differentiate. That's good teaching. So, you know, specifically at a very targeted high level, that's something that we'd have to explore. What, if anything, could be replicated at that outside of what we currently are doing, you know, with that niche of high level learner.
To Lisa's point, we have a plan in place that's our goal. If it's not SAGE, it's got to be something. That's my point. So I just don't want that to get lost.
There could be a partnership with another school district or something like that too. I don't know, I mean, but I agree with Director White, but I do think that we've, like you said, the integrity of the program, as well as we experienced that the whole board voted for the elimination of the advanced math because of that same reason. you know, we need to figure that out. That's not something that's gonna happen here tonight.
We'll go through the last two
Yep.
chunks and then open it up for some thoughts for us to consider in the process.
What is the 9K in iPad? What exactly are we?
Yeah, I'm gonna have Mr. Milazzo come forward, please.
Everybody, board directors, my name is Marcus Milazzo, I'm the director of technology. The question was, what is the K1 reduction?
The 9,000 reduction?
Yeah,
What is that
all-
for exactly?
Yeah, all the prices you see there are reflected off of a savings tied to the management software that we use for these products. So the $9,000 would be a reduction for our mobile device management solution, which is Jamf. And then in regards to the desktops, that's based off about 800 desktops. And that's a reduction in our MDR, which is our Managed Detection and Response Program, which is CrowdStrike Falcon Complete. So the savings you see there are based off of the reduction of management software.
We're not removing any iPads?
I'm sorry?
We're not removing any iPads?
No, we would be removing those devices.
Would there be any savings in the lease payment? Because we just paid, last year we paid a lot of money for lease payments for iPads, so.
These devices have been paid. So the iPads at K1, our 5th and 6th gen iPads, they're 7 years old. And the desktop computers,
So we own them outright.
we do own them outright.
But I assume you have something in budget for this year to buy more to replace as you.
No, like he says, it trickles down, so the new ones go to the high school.
Right, but what's the
And
budget?
then as they go off lease, they trickle down to the younger. So those are, we're not paying for the devices, we're paying for the software on them.
Correct.
And we wouldn't maintain the devices.
Right, we just wouldn't keep them.
Correct.
That's been the tradition for a while now, especially since we got rid of the Chromebooks.
And wasn't there something in the, if the levy doesn't pass, I mean, maybe it just was reduction in technology, but I thought at some point we talked about K through 5 iPads, but maybe I'm completely wrong, I don't remember.
Well, we started with K1
Oh,
because of the age of the devices and the utilization at those grade levels. Grades 2, they have fast bridge testing that they do on the devices. 3, 4, and 5 is MCAs as well. And going back to the failed tech levy, we've removed all of our wired labs at the elementaries. So in years before we had a one-to-one solution, during testing season, the kids would come down to Media Center Labs and do the testing on the wired labs. Those are now been removed.
Oh, okay.
And the Chromebook carts went away after the tech levy
They're
failed
gone as
too.
well.
Yeah, and then there's other programmatic stuff in the, like with the coding stuff that goes on, that goes in there, and there's a couple of other programs, not just the Fast Bridge. That's part of their curriculum, so we have to make a change there too.
Correct.
Media curriculum.
Everybody clear, or any other questions? So if we increased the reduction in iPads by a couple grade levels moving up, would the savings be the same with each grade levels? And you said, I'm not saying that's what we should do, I'm just saying.
Yeah, you would see an increased savings based off of the number of devices.
So K1's $9,000, so would
Right.
2, 3 be another $9,000, or would be more?
Potentially, depending on the numbers at those grade levels. Yeah.
I think there's other software though that they get that would be probably an incremental increase, is that correct, Marcus?
Could you?
There's more software that's used for grades 3, 4, and 5, I
Correct.
believe, so there would be.
Based on the curriculum, yes. Correct.
And how many, I mean, most schools are really pushing access to understanding STEM and doing that in grades K through 5 now. With that, my concern overall would be the attractiveness of our district in that area because of the, that's not they're going the opposite direction.
Yeah, I feel like
Yeah.
that's part of our K1 focus. I think our usage is significantly less at the K1 level.
Right.
So part of why this is on the docket. I feel like our recent curricular work is not reliant on the technology.
Well, and I was at a national school board conference in Orlando last week and talking to other board directors from California. They're actually getting away from the technology because they know that handwriting and when kids are writing things, they remember it better. So there's somewhat of a push, you're seeing it kind of go both ways, I would say.
So I'm on the National STEM Advisory Council for the United States, and it's actually going the opposite direction to get kids more into the critical thinking, doing more science projects and coding. Yeah, coding is huge, starting in 3rd grade.
They don't do that course here though. I'm thinking, as a parent, I would love to see them go away completely.
And I've heard that loud and clear
iPads.
from our community as
I
well.
would much rather get rid of iPads and devices than teachers.
People want to know how to handwrite, like they want their kids to know how to write. That's the disconnect, so.
So is there anything else revolving around this particular box?
Questions?
I'd like to know about the impact. I don't need to know all the details, but I know that the staff desktop computers and the lack of tools to some of our staff could cause additional work hours or inconveniences that could take away from their time from students, and that does concern me, but I don't know how old those desktops are.
8 to 9 years old.
Okay, so they're just a backup for what we currently give them.
Well, good question. The desktop computers are tied to all the classroom AV equipment currently.
Which is also aging, projection capabilities, smart boards, et cetera.
Director
That's time for a
Milazzo,
different
you mentioned, I think maybe during our intro brief that some of the teachers prefer the desktop over the laptop because it does connect right to it, and then it's all aging, but you have to replace the laptops more, right, versus the desktops more.
Sure.
Could you explain maybe the cost benefit of maybe keeping desktops versus just getting rid of and then saying, hey, we're just gonna put a desktop in every room and you don't get to take a computer home?
Yeah,
I know nobody wants to do that, but.
Yeah. Thank you for the question.
Yeah.
We've had those conversations at senior leaders and with other groups as well. Laptops, not to throw a curveball, but our laptops this is year 6 for our laptops. So we have definitely aging equipment out there. The desktops are more convenient in the fact that they are hardwired connected to the AV equipment in the classrooms. The issue is with the age and the upkeep of those devices. You walk into a classroom and you know you have to start your lesson in 5 minutes and you didn't turn your desktop on 15 minutes before class started, it's still going to be booting up. So in regards to laptops is because of the feature set and the functionality is that they're more portable, right? They can be more prone to breakage. We are seeing that our batteries are starting to go on our laptops, so that is a common break fix that we deal with. But the laptops, because of their form function, allow that teaching, whether you're in your resident classroom, whether you're in another space, I mean, the technology travels with you, so it allows you to have that freedom of working anytime, anywhere. So there's pros and cons to both. Now that our teachers have had laptops for the past 6 years, I think it would be a really hard sell to say we're getting rid of those and just going to a desktop because of the functionality and the freedom that these devices provide. Costs have come down in hardware. It seems like hardware comes down and software goes up. I have pricing for replacements for these laptops, and I have a low, mid, and high. And they are comparable to what you can get a really decent desktop for. So the costs have shifted there a little bit too. We have been fortunate that Apple has provided us the last couple leases with 0% financing, and then with a $1 buyout option at the end of that lease, so that we pay that $1 per device and we own the device. But getting that 0% financing's been big. You asked about leases coming off, and we do have a lease coming off. We had a 2-year lease for 1,400 iPads. We're in year 2 of that lease, which we made that payment, so next fiscal year, we'll be exercising that $1 buyout option. So, yeah, you're welcome.
And then there's another lease, and
We have one more after that, and it's for, we would be, sorry, my eyes are tired and I'm getting old. Next year we'll be in year 4 of that lease. We're currently in year 3 of that 4-year lease.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank
Did
you.
I answer your question, sir?
You did, thank you, appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Well,
Chair, wait, we've got one last box.
yep, I was just gonna move to it. Other reductions?
So I mentioned earlier that we'd be, speaking to this Q-Comp adjustment, we would be reducing our Pure Coach team by 2. And this is to align our revenues where we currently, with our lease, or with our Q-Comp levy, we are overspending in our Q-Comp budget, so this would align that. And result in a changing in our PD and support structures at our sites, because all of our Q-Comp Pure Coaches are assigned to sites, and we would have to lessen the number of observations that they'd be able to give and support they'd be able to give to teaching staff.
Just an aside, the governor's budget proposal is eliminating QComp in 2027. Go much further, but it is on his budget.
That would have a significant impact to our professional development and support and coaching for our teachers. But if that in fact goes through, obviously that would be on the docket for reduction next year.
And the rest of these are,
Miscellaneous, so we've got through our health provider, a fit committee, kind of incentive that we can eliminate. The calendar adjustments that we've made, with 2 fewer student contact days, you'll see the quick, that's what's driving the last portion of that, of those line items. And then we have the pool at Twin Oaks that to maintain it is going to cost significant to bring it up to code, so to speak. So taking that offline, we could save $75,000. And then we have the admin assistant reduction.
Yep,
Is that
so
just
we're
the-
looking at reducing 3 positions for the administrative assistants, in kind of concert with some of the other program changes. So a reduction in the MinCap administrative assistant, the Laker Online administrative assistant, and then 1 administrative assistant at the high school. And that reconfiguration will equate to about $163,000 in savings from that restructuring. And then looking at meeting with they're continuing our conversations with our task force and meeting with them specifically to also talk about some potential optimizing resources within the administrative assistants. That would be a cost neutral thing. It wouldn't be a savings at this time, but there might be additional changes in that group that we'll bring forward to the board after we have a chance to meet with them.
okay.
I got a quick question on
Let me
the,
just interject quick. It's 10:30, and I don't want our brains to melt, and I also don't want to cut off discussion, but I want us to be very sensitive as we wrap up here, because I want you to have time to have the administration say, what do you need from us so we can move forward, knowing that we have about a month-ish before we have to make the call. So,
the pool. What, I didn't see the pool, at least on the long-term maintenance. Can you just tell us?
Yeah, I'll have Director Powers talk a little bit about some of the pending repairs.
Yeah.
So the
The direct savings that we're looking at here, the utility bills, the chemicals for the pool, that doesn't include any reduction in the maintenance costs for that. That's just those two line items. But if we're looking at other costs, savings is the wrong word.
Avoidance.
Well, it's the LTFM fund. So the money I don't spend at Twin Oaks on the pool, I can allocate to other projects. In all honesty, our LTFM fund is low. I have right now about $30 million worth of projects, and in the 10 years, I'm gonna have $15 million worth of money. So it's about half of what I need just to cover the already identified problems or maintenance issues. So being able to shift that money from the Twin Oaks pool would allow us to do something else that either wouldn't get done or would get done in 11 or 12 or 13 years.
Okay. And what's gonna happen? What would you do to the pool? Just fill it in?
No,
Concrete?
actually, that would be a not good scenario.
Okay.
There's an additional cost to do anything along those lines. So to decommission the pool, I mean, if we decided we're just gonna close it, there's some equipment that I could take and relocate over to Hidden Oaks, which would save us additional LTFM funds. The filter system, it's gonna be $135,000 to replace. There are other types of costs like that I could transfer over to Hidden Oaks. So closing down the pool would be identifying those types of things, emptying the water and leaving it. We would not be doing any type of a conversion. To convert that space, I couldn't just fill it in. I would have to remove the entire infrastructure. I can't abandon or bury piping or any drains or anything along those lines. So one of the topics that had come up to, okay, we could reuse this space and convert it to something else. Well, I could, but it would cost us $500,000 to $1 million in addition to whatever other types of things I might need to do to that space. Right now, I mean, there are still things that we could do with that pool that wouldn't entail just eliminating it. I can't talk about those things because we haven't gone farther than that.
We're exploring some options for alternative usage and management of the pool. And so as we work through some of that, we'll come back to the board for an update. But at this time, you know, for us, we would take that offline for this immediate cost savings and have time to then think about what does that long-term alternative usage look like.
Some of the concerns that I want to make sure all of you are aware of, if this pool is closed and I relocate some equipment, that's going to add to the cost to bring it back up to being usable, above and beyond just the moving the equipment. Because to restart this pool, I'm going to have to go through every joint, every connection of pipe. I mean, the thankful thing is at Twin Oaks, we have a tunnel system that's underneath the pool. So I can go through all those little pieces. I can go through the pumps. I can go through the heater systems. All of those things will have to be refurbished before we can start the pool back up again. So it's not a short-term thing to close a pool. Is it the best situation for us? It's going to give us some direct savings, and there's a lot of other things that we can spend that money on.
Now, would that effectively close that section of the building? Because then you'd be creating a fall hazard and all kinds of things like that.
Yes and no. If we could use the pool as a storage area for some of our community ed programs. Right now, we've got a tremendous amount of programs, both the cheer, gymnastics. We don't have enough storage space for all of their equipment, and they would love to take over some of that just as a storage. In order to make it safe, the thing I would probably need to do would be to install some type of a temporary railing system to make sure that people couldn't fall into an empty pool. We would look at limiting access though, so this would all be under supervision. Would I absolutely need to do that? No. But as a safety item, I could.
I have a question. During the levy conversation, if the levy passes, we would fix the lower entrance of the high school. If we were to do this, would you be able to shift the dollars to, I don't know what it
Depends on what you're
costs.
talking about for the lower entry. If we're talking
Well,
the
it was
secure
whatever was-
entry,
Yeah,
the
secure
secure entry
entry.
has to be done with capital.
Oh, okay. So
That's
this,
nothing
that's
we
not a
could,
shift.
no, it's
Okay.
not an LTFM fundable type
Okay.
program.
Okay, all right, thank you. Mhm.
Now, legislatively advocating for expanded usage of LTFM, and, I mean, it's part of the conversation, you know? So,
And then, I'm sorry, just quickly, the two of optimizing resources, just to explain those quickly, again, they're not cost savings to us, but the recommendation, currently, we have a EAP program through Fairview that we're recommending to eliminate, and utilize our EAP offering with our vendor for life and LTD. It is not as robust and doesn't provide as many resources, but it could still get us a EAP need with eliminating the cost that we spend. It's just about $14,000 on the Fairview EAP to cover the Vector software costs that was previously free to us, but now we've been informed by them that they're gonna now start charging us, again, around the $14,000 for that first year. So we're recommending eliminating our partnership with Fairview EAP to smooth those funds to cover Vector. Vector does tracking for all of our mandated training with our staff, so it helps us ensure we have compliance around mandated trainings. And then the other one for consideration for the board, currently right now we have shared building substitutes at our elementary. We have the vast majority of our subs are provided by Teachers on Call, but we do have daily building subs that we employ ourselves. It's very cost neutral now that, especially now that Teachers on Call has raised their administrative rates on us. And it could give us a one body in those schools to meet all of our increased needs in those areas, especially with ESST and paid family medical coming down the line. So just for consideration to change it, instead of sharing where we have the inconsistency in our system, to change it so they each have one daily building sub, which would be about the same cost as our Teachers on Call subs are.
Is that similar to like what Eden Prairie or another thing does where they actually hire, you're shaking his head yes in the back of you. So yeah, so they've made the decision in some cases to get rid of the Teachers on Call to keep
No,
the
this is not
consistency.
recommending getting rid of Teachers
No,
on Call.
okay, no.
Not at all. There is a significant difference between having us staff one versus us staffing all substitutes and getting rid of the administration that Teachers on Call does. There's a lot of efficiencies with going with Teachers on Call. They're the ones that are hiring, recruiting, and liable for workers' comp, fringe benefits, ESST, all those things.
And I wasn't suggesting getting rid of them, I just
No.
moving slowly towards getting more of the consistent and our own control over.
Yeah, our
substitutes.
recommendation is one per building for elementary,
Okay.
because we also have to take in consideration, that would be expanding our current, right now we're around 1,100 employees with about 200 casual. That would be expanding our casual by at least 500 to 600. That would be a significant strain that would take resources away from optimizing recruiting, because then we're gonna lose Teachers on Call subs that serve in multiple districts. They reduces their access to benefits, so we might lose substitutes in that. So again, this is just a recommendation for one per building. It's not a recommendation to do any more than that. This also provides opportunity for those buildings, should they have a longer term leave, to utilize that and build a relationship with those students, to put the daily building sub in a medium term and long term sub position, versus the continuous recruiting that goes on. We'll still probably need that depending on the number of leaves per building, but it gives us one more resource when looking at leaves.
Okay. So, what does administration need from us tonight? Do you want us to continue to discuss among each other, continue to ask you questions? How do you want us to proceed?
I think for us, I've taken some notes of some pressure points throughout the conversation that, we'll reconsider as, reconvene as a team to review. I think a couple of you had mentioned some other thoughts or ideas. I think that would be the best for us right now, that we can begin to cost out certain things that a couple of you have kind of alluded to. So if we could maybe close with that, and that way we can come back and maybe we have a mid-update at the business meeting, and then another, kind of directional meeting at the last study session.
So just so we're clear, at the study session in February, you'll need
That's where,
pretty clear direction.
we need that clear direction by then, because we're already gonna be 2 weeks probably beyond where we would ideally like to be.
Okay.
First half. So if there's a couple of things that you have.
Yeah,
or
I do have
just
some
take
thoughts.
notes,
So,
or-
I mean, just looking at this at a higher level and areas, and I fully appreciate this is very difficult and sympathize. We're dealing with people's jobs and understand that. Experience with organizational planning and gone through many cuts in my work life, and it's not easy. So I understand that. But, I guess the areas where I feel like we could do a little more research is, first and foremost, I think that we should, do some sort of organizational planning and rationalization. That's typically the first step that you would take in organizational planning, and just looking at your org and understanding, the guidelines of how that sits. So, any director must have, 6 to 8 managers reporting to them. Rationalizing, how many employees constitutes an admin assistant or things like that. So setting all those guidelines. I think we need to look at the ratio of administration and student support staff, lumping them together with, versus direct teachers. Just looking at last year's financial report, I think that ratio was, every 4 or 5 teachers, there's 1 admin or support staff person. So any cuts that we make, you should consider that ratio and make equally as many cuts on the administration side and support staff. I also think that in June 2023, I think I sent this, Dr. Thomas, we actually made new investments despite declining enrollment. There was, I think, 10.5 FTE from that meeting, and it included 2 middle school counselors, 2.5 deans, 1 school psychologist, 4 cultural liaisons, assistant director, and differentiation specialists. So have those positions been re-reviewed? And, we made additional headcount choices despite declining enrollment. I think we need to revisit some of those areas. Other areas, like we talked about transportation, I really would love to see some sort of capacity and average ride time. I think transportation seems to be an area where we're getting a lot of extra costs. So understanding that, is there anything we can do there to, just increase the number of students on a bus? If they have to ride the bus 5 minutes longer, fine, if we can keep a program instead. And then the last area is definitely any additional reductions we could get in removing K-5 iPads, and my stance is we should be removing any sort of software and application programs and iPads before teachers. I don't know if we can do shared carts for testing at the higher grades as needed, or get a little creative there and getting them off the screens. And I think we need to align better to our strategic plan. I do not support some of these programs that we're cutting first as first options. They should be very last.
Appreciate your perspectives here and some of the other things for us to take a look at, review, and cost out. Director Atkins?
Yeah, I would just chime in that, I've learned a little bit about, I'm not a budget expert, but I do agree with Director Mason's approach. I think when I've listened to other districts and what they're doing, their administration is bringing like a 1-2 scenario, like this is case B, this is case A, this is case B. And well, I think you guys did do a great job of optimizing resources here. I almost think this is a this and scenario. And when I say that, one thing that I've learned is about child-based budgeting, and I can share more information with you, but it's basically taking a look at each classroom. What does it cost to staff a classroom with a teacher, and the resources that are needed to support that teacher, and then you go into the para staff, and then you build up your pyramid all the way to get to the top, and the top is administrative and student support service. So it's very similar to what Director Mason is saying, is that we really should not be cutting anything on the bottom of that pyramid. And what we really need to look at doing, and I know my message has not changed from the last probably 3 or 4 board meetings, but I really believe that we're heavy in administration and support staff. And when you look at the growth that we've seen over the past 10 years, our enrollment is declining. And so I would like to see a scenario of, finding $2 million in just admin and support staff. And then, what does that look like as a scenario, is what I would like to see. And I know, I understand, like, I've been through job cuts a million times, it's not easy, but really committing to our strategic plan, and how do we go back, and maybe that is, we make these cuts, but we're gonna add in synergy programs, so we're gonna add in advanced math programs. I mean, I feel like this is a time where we need to sort of right ship the district to align with our strategic plan. So is that clear, or?
I got you.
Okay.
Capture it.
Okay. All right.
That's all we have for tonight.
Talk to each other and ask questions as needed.
And in our one-on-ones.
Absolutely.
And or, with me and our team too. I think that's gonna be an important piece to, as you're processing through this, we're available, so.
Okay. If there's nothing else, I think we are.